And just what old-fashioned way do you have in mind, Big Bob?
Riddle me this, taxi guy. What has a heart that doesn't beat, a mouth that doesn't speak, and a bed but never sleeps?
Tony leaned back, stroking his chin thoughtfully.
A heart that doesn't beat, a mouth that doesn't speak. Could it be a statue? No, statues don't have beds. Or do they?
He glanced suspiciously at Bob, half expecting a trick.
Well, Tony Two Doors, got an answer?
Bob prodded, a mischievous grin spreading across his face.
All right, don't rush a thinker. I'm thinking.
He tapped his fingers on the taxi's hood, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a minute that felt like an eternity in riddle-solving time, Tony threw his hands up in exasperation. He had been racking his brain, trying to piece together the clues, but it seemed like the answer was just out of reach.
All right, you win, Bob. I give up. This one's too tough for me. What is it? What has a heart that doesn't beat, a mouth that doesn't speak, and a bed but never sleeps? Come on, tell me already.
Bob threw his head back and let out a booming laugh. He had been waiting for this moment, savoring the anticipation.
A river, Tony. A river. It's got a heart, a mouth, and a bed, but none of them function like you'd expect. It's got a riverbed, but it doesn't sleep. It's so simple once you know it, right?
Tony, realizing the simplicity of the answer, groaned and slapped his forehead. He couldn't believe he hadn't thought of it sooner.
Of course, a river. I should have gotten that. It was right there in front of me.
Don't worry, Tony. Your brain's probably just rusty from all that time cooped up in that tiny cab. You'll get the next one for sure. Now it's my turn to be riddled. Let's see if you can stump me.
Tony smirked, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. He had a good one up his sleeve.
All right, Big Bob. Prepare to have your mind blown. This one's going to be tricky. What has wheels but can't drive, a fare but doesn't charge, and takes you places but never moves? Think hard, Bob. This one's a real brain teaser.
Bob scratched his head, his brow furrowing as he pondered Tony's riddle.
Wheels but can't drive. A fare but doesn't charge. Takes you places but never moves. That's a tough one, Tony.
He glanced out the window as if the bustling city might offer a clue. People rushed by, pigeons pecked at crumbs on the sidewalk, and a tumbleweed of receipts rolled across the street. Wait, a tumbleweed?
Tony, you're messing with me, right? You trying to say the answer's a tumbleweed?
Tony just grinned, his silence speaking volumes. Bob sighed dramatically.
All right, I give up. What is it? Tony, a mischievous glint in his eye, grinned back. Bring it on, bus buddy, bring it on. So, ready for another round? He shook his head, chuckling at his own inability to decipher the riddle. The two men, their competitive spirits momentarily satisfied, settled into a comfortable silence. The city noises provided a steady backdrop to their unspoken truce. Tony exclaimed, unable to contain his amusement any longer. It has wheels. You pay a fare to unlock it from the others, and it takes you around the store but never actually moves on its own. A shopping cart, Bob, a shopping cart. All right, Tony, this one's a real head-scratcher. I hope you're ready for a tough one.
What has an engine but no wheels, a fare but no passengers, and travels the world but never leaves its corner? Think carefully, it's trickier than it sounds. No wheels, a fare but no passengers, travels the world? This is a tough one. Tony leaned back in his seat, his brow furrowed in thought. He was determined to figure it out.
Suddenly he snapped his fingers, a look of realization dawning on his face.
A postcard, that's it. It travels the world. You pay a fare for the stamp, and it has no wheels or passengers. It fits perfectly.
Bob's face fell. He thought he had Tony stumped this time.
Darn it, Tony, you're on a roll. How do you keep getting these right?
He chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief and amusement.
All right, your turn to stump me. Let's see if you can come up with something I can't solve.
Tony, emboldened by his recent victory, cleared his throat and delivered his next riddle with a confident smile.
I have keys but no locks. Think about it carefully. I have a space but no room. This one might be a bit tricky. You can enter but can't go outside. What am I? Take your time, it's a tough one.
Bob leaned back, stroking his chin thoughtfully.
Keys but no locks, a space but no room. You can enter but can't go outside.
He mumbled the words under his breath, trying to make sense of them. He glanced around, hoping for a flash of inspiration. The answer, he was sure, was right in front of him. But what was it? Frustration began to creep in, settling in his chest like a bad burrito.
Give up, Bob?
Tony asked, unable to hide the triumphant smirk spreading across his face. Bob, defeated but not broken, sighed.
All right, Tony, what is it? You've clearly got a knack for these things.
Tony leaned forward, his voice a low whisper.
A keyboard, Bob. You enter information, but you can't physically go outside of it.
Bob's eyes widened in realization.
A keyboard! Of course, those tricky little things.
He chuckled. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. The sounds of the city, usually just background noise, seemed to amplify their amusement. A car horn blared, sounding suspiciously like a laugh track to their riddle showdown. As their laughter subsided, a thought occurred to Bob. He leaned towards Tony, a mischievous glint in his eye.
Hey Tony, one more riddle, just one more for the road?
Tony, always up for a challenge, nodded eagerly.
Hit me with your best shot, Big Bob.
Bob said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
All right, here it is. What's the difference between you and me, Tony?
Tony's brow furrowed. This wasn't a traditional riddle, but a personal one. He racked his brain, trying to find the humorous disparity between a bus driver and a taxi driver.
I don't know, Bob. You tell me.
Tony finally conceded. His curiosity piqued. Bob threw his head back and roared with laughter as he put his bus in gear.
My fares expect me to stop talking. See you around, Tony.
He called out as he pulled away from the curb, leaving a bewildered and slightly annoyed Tony in his wake.